You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hey, I'm Doug Draper, and with me is our international correspondent over on the other side of the pond, Ian Richardson. Ian and I are going to take the lead today, and we're going to talk about Brexit, the UK engagement with EU and the new agreements that were signed, and how that's going to relate to things going over here in America. So, Ian, our official international correspondent, that's a lot of pressure on you, my friend. How you doing?
Doing good, thank you. I'm just realising, as you say, it's evening time over here. You can see the lighting, can't you? There you are, looking bright and breezy in the morning over there, stateside, and here we are. Well into tea time in London, or just outside of London. And yeah, what a week we had last week. What a few weeks we had leading up to that, as if it wasn't just the general Christmas build-up. We had some pretty momentous history we were living through and are living through this week. So glad to be sitting here talking about it with you again, Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't appreciate your involvement enough. So thanks. So let's just jump into this, man. I tell you what, we were going to get together last week before the holiday, and here we are afterwards. And I'm kind of glad that happened because there's so much that transpired in the last week, specifically with the EU and the UK trade deals. So let's just kind of talk on a high level. Maybe let's talk about what transpired and what happened last week, specific to cargo and how that's come together.
Well, as you've seen, it's very much in the news now, and it's been in the news for 4 years. When you are over this side of the water, it reached a point where it's something that's been in the news, and more than in the news, everybody's conversations every day. It split the nation. It probably split most of Europe, good and bad, in and out, one side or the other. It's such a fine line between what the man in the street felt about it that it really did divide the whole population. Now we've come down to the point where the decision was made. People got to live with the decision. And then, of course, we've spent the last 12 months in what's been known as the transition period. So we'd left the EU, but we had 12 months that expire on New Year's Eve coming, this next couple of days. And this transition period had to come to an end, and a trade negotiation had to be struck. And the trade negotiation was finally agreed at the 11th hour. As you can understand, a very complex trade negotiation. I don't believe anybody has actually had time to fully read into the 1,200 pages, sometimes advertised as 2,000 pages of text from that trade agreement. But essentially, the biggest takeaway that I can talk about this week that we didn't know last week is we have a free trade deal between the UK and Europe, which is probably the most important factor. There was the spectre of duties and taxes between UK and the EU countries, member countries, and that's now gone away. The rest was more about political issues, not trade. The political issues being UK specifically wanted its sovereignty. It wanted to be a sovereign nation, taking charge of its own decisions on immigration and various matters surrounding that. But the key focus for us in our industry and for business was this matter of free trade and how we will now go forward from the 1st of January, trading with our partners. A vast part of our business being traded with those countries. So that's what's come into effect. We were hoping this would happen. It has happened. Now we're sitting here in this funny hiatus holiday period, which I don't know if you have it over there, but we do over here. It's some people are working these couple of days, most people are not. There's not a great deal going on. So you haven't got this hubbub of trade like we had last week. And now we've all got to sit here and try and figure this out before we go back to work in earnest on the 4th of January. Really, there's a lot of people like me in between going to be doing a lot of work between now and the 4th of January, which is reading, interpreting, and trying to be ready with our customers to do business on the 4th of January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like any good term paper in college, right? You wait till the 11th hour. That's where all the good ideas come from. So I guess that's how it goes. So talk about one or two changes, right? So from being over here on this side of the Atlantic, to me, on a broad stroke, it's like, okay, it took 4 years and here's where we are. And from my perspective, it's not a whole lot different than where it was 4 years ago as far as the free trade is there. That was a huge factor in it. Maybe you could dive in a couple of the nuances or things that are different that came up from the agreement.
Certainly. The no real news has come out yet, Doug, about what the differences are. All we do know, the biggest thing to hang our hat on, is this free trade. What this will mean, the biggest takeaway now is going to come down to documentation and statistical collection of data, meaning that as of last week, if you are a customs broker, if you're a business importing or exporting, you or your brokers are filling out documents, just like we do with all other international trade, which will statistically declare your tariff code on your items, and then the other statistical information, such as the value of the goods, the country of origin of the goods, where it's going, where it's coming from, so import, export. And what's happened now, the biggest change will be, the biggest takeaway I can give you until all of us have read these 12 or 1,500 pages of agreement, is that as of January 1st, the UK is not now dealing with one country called EU. It's now dealing with the 28 member states. So statistical analysis and documentation will have to be drawn up. It's a bit like we used to do. It's back to the future. We used to do work like this decades ago before the EU was fully formed. And that's going to be putting a lot of pressure on the various authorities and on business, because now we have to prepare customs entries for these 28 countries, not just one, and our HM Revenue and Customs, as we call them, our people who collect any duties and taxes and do the statistical analysis, are now going to be swamped with the amount of information they used to have to handle. So to me, I think data is going to be a big problem. Can we cope? You saw what happened last week at Dover. We were corresponding about it, and that was not Brexit related. That was COVID related. So a bit of a perfect storm. We saw that literally in 24 hours, we can end up with truck queues in our motorways system closest to the ports of Dover, which directly faces France. And in 24 hours, we had 4,000 vehicles backed up that couldn't go across. I do fear, I'm a very positive person. You spoke to me many times, though, but I do fear that we may find ourselves with quite some congestion in these early days of the new year due to this massive increase in documentation that's now going to have to be handled, and a, shall we say, business that's not necessarily prepared for it. People are not working out of offices, as you probably know. Everyone's still working from home. We're in severe, what we call lockdown 4 situation here in most parts of England. At least half of the population is in this lockdown tier 4. So it means you can't travel, you can't go out, you got to work from home. So here we are wrestling with a massive change in how business is done without the benefit of going into the office, sitting amongst our peers and our groups of teams of people, and trying to figure this all out, over conference calls and emails. It's got the potential for some trouble. I do believe we will figure it out, but there's bound to be, with the shortness of time to prepare, there is bound to be some problems in that first week or two or more as we go into the new year.
So you're basically saying that of the 28 nations, there's no automated connectivity to some of those groups, and everything goes back to manual nature of pushing paper back and forth. Is that kind of when you talk about the congestion and the data flow, it's more manual now?
It's not so much the manual, it's more the change of coding. The fact that now, instead of there just being this one block it's many blocks. So the amount of customs entries that now have to be prepared will be multiple, not single. And if you multiply this across all the importers and all the exporters, it will be a logjam. There has been a massive amount of data integration over the last several years. We've also been changing the customs system here in England to be ready to try to manage this growth in international trade. A, that's not fully ready yet. B, this has come at a time that's not ideal. Instead of a business having, let's say, an ideal 3 or 4 months to get used to this, and maybe some tutorials and training, and it's not. It's going to go boom. The lights are going to go on, and we got to come out of the doors and race as of the 1st of January. In fact, the 1st of January to get everything prepared. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll see if you're laughing in a couple of weeks. Maybe we'll start with that one, right? So,
of course.
Yeah. So one thing that we were talking about just a few minutes ago is maybe the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about is that, hey, there's money and businesses related to this. And you had made mention that nobody's really talking about demurrage fees are going to be associated with cargo and import sitting, even if they're directed in the right area and the intent is there. It's going to take more time. And if I'm a steamship line or a trucking company, it's not my problem that my truck is in the queue of a queue waiting to cross over into France, or my ocean container is tied up, and that's revenue that I'm losing. What's the feedback from? Hey, we get it. Things have changed, but I still got to make my money. And if my if my equipment is sitting around, I need to be compensated for that. What's the general feedback on the charges that will be incurred with things slowing down?
It's a very relevant point. This word, for those of us in the industry, we're all very familiar with these words, rent and demurrage. They usually come together. Rent usually being the cost incurred for the space taken up on a physical quayside, while something waiting to customs clear and making the rest of its journey. And demurrage is usually the word for the equipment, so the container that the goods are carried in, or the truck that it's sitting in, for those not so versed in our language. But both of these items clock up at a daily rate, and that daily rate goes up every few days. So by the time you've gone past a week, and they are deliberately caged by the owner of those assets, whether it be a shipping line, a ferry company, or a trucking company, so that people get their equipment back quickly and don't use the quayside as a free storage facility. So they are deliberately punitive charges. But in these awkward circumstances where industry isn't perhaps fully ready, these charges are not widely reported, Doug. You're right. I read, like you do, all of the trade press, and it doesn't seem to pick up on this rent and demurrage issue. It can run into thousands of pounds per consignment. And I read every article last week, because there's plenty of time on my hands, from esteemed journalists, certainly here in the UK, the Times, the Lloyd's List, over there, the Journal of Commerce, everyone picking up very accurately on what was going on, but not maybe mentioning this horrible elephant in the room, this costly rent and demurrage, which comes out of somebody's pocket, and they've either got to try to move this on into the value of the good, or they got to swallow it, and the industry pays for it. The people levying those charges are putting their hands up in the air saying, hey, those are my charges, you pay. And there's not really, that I can see, any great desire to ease up on those charges. I've been in the middle of all this myself on behalf of customers this last couple of weeks. It's, hey, it's not our problem, these costs are causing up. You have to pay.
Yeah. That's a tough discussion to have as a service provider, moving cargo to and from. I don't envy you on that one, Rand. That could be a tough. What do you think? Is it going to help expedite the process? Meaning, hey, we'll put up with this for a couple of weeks, and I get it, right? I got to pay a few extra bucks here or there, or I can push this off to some of my my consumers with cost increases or something. But at some point, that's not inevitable. I mean, it's not. It is inevitable that has to change. It can't go on forever. What's your take on the timing of this? Is it going to be, hey, it'll be a pain in the ass through the end of January and then it'll all rectify itself? Or is this something we're going to be talking about for months?
No, I think you're right. Again, I tend to be that positive commentator. I think it will be a pain in the ass for at least a month as we go through this, because what's going to happen, this will be we suspect there will be problems in the early days. And of course, it takes time then once we start to live with this and people learn to deal with it. And I'm just saying industry, we're talking about at the government level. You've got to talk about those people whose job it is within, the task force of HM Revenue and Customs and their counterparts on the continent, is that they've got to learn to live with this brave new world. Yes, certainly they've been working scenarios, I'm very sure, for the last year. But there is no doubt massive changes coming. Even if it gets fixed sooner, there will be backlogs to work through. We saw what happened last week with the queues at Dover. The television cameras have turned away, probably still there. I mean, I could take a drive down there for you tomorrow, Doug, and have a look, because that takes time to ease that backlog. You probably saw there was a holding small airfield. It only had 4,000 trucks on it. One of my clever customers mentioned to me this week. So there were 4,000 40-foot trailers queued up there that you all saw on your news with aerial footage. Well, when you think about a container vessel coming in from overseas, especially from our Asia trade, they're discharging 10,000 of those size trailers in the best part of 24 hours. And there are many vessels doing this every day. So that 4,000 you were looking at Dover, that's just a tiny percentage of trade that's coming into and out of our borders. Yes, we do have many ports, many terminals, but it's going to be a real pain, I think, for at least a month. Not wishing bad. I'm hoping for the best, and there is no problem. We talk again soon and say, what was that worry about? Was that year 2000 that didn't happen? No, it seems to be it's a perfect storm. We've got COVID. We've got only a week to prepare for this, the whole of industry, including customs. We've got the problems that caused last week because of the issues at the border. Everything is upon us that says it looks like we've got a perfect storm coming. And everyone, like I was last week, helping people out. I was working around the clock to try to keep things moving. But all along the supply chain, it's all very well, hey, we managed to get our release on our goods. Now try and find a truck to get it delivered to a warehouse or a DC or a fulfillment center. It was nigh on impossible. We have this problem here's a little interesting snippet for you, Doug. What's been happening during this last 12 or even 24 months is that, remember, here in the UK, under free movement of people within the EU, we've had this vast workforce of willing people to work, let's say, somewhat blue-collar work, such as driving a truck. And because there's been a lack of clarity for this last 12 and 24-month period, a lot of those workers have decided to return to their European countries, mostly Eastern Europe, and certainly Poland and Romania, Bulgaria, because there wasn't any certainty that they'd be allowed to work here and what kind of work permit do they need to work under. So a lot of these people have returned home to gain gainful employment in their country, leaving us with a huge lack of heavy goods vehicle drivers. Driving a container or a trailer truck with goods is not as well paid or as glamorous as driving, perhaps, using the same driving license and authorities if you drive for one of the big retailers, which comes with benefits, pension benefits and holiday periods and things like this. So a lot of people, if you have the right qualifications, they're tending to move into that kind of work. So we found ourselves with a dearth of drivers. So add that on top of all these other things we have coming. It's a real issue. We need to try and find a way to train up drivers who want to come back into the industry. It's not a lot of fun, not for everybody, but add that one to our list of things to deal with in the next coming weeks, Doug.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a list of unintended consequences, right? That's related to this, and we'll just start checking things off down the list. You know, on a global trade this week, Pete and I have been talking a lot about security. There was a huge breach out here in the U.S. In the last couple of weeks called Cozy Bear, where we had some foreign governments come in and really wreak havoc, in the sense that we don't really know what they saw, what they did. And so everybody's a little concerned about what if or what could be. So now that things have changed and there's 28 entities you're working with, talk about some of the security concerns that have come up related to the movement of goods in and out of the country.
I think, again, I'll be honest with you, Doug, it's a huge issue, and I wish as a commentator on my trade I could be more clear and concise on it. I honestly think this is top of the list, along with many others at the top of the list, which is keeping trade moving, is the security issue. And I think you'll find there's still a lot to be digested. There is going to be a fine balance here between the sovereign nation's desire to keep its borders safe, and you've got to think and bear in mind there is. I'd say this as a British person. We do have this island mentality over here, this side of the water, where we do feel that we can sometimes pull up the drawbridge and be this island nation and close the doors. But I think that's more of a sort of common, every man in the street view. I'm chose this industry to be in for the last 40 years, and I'm very aware there's a big wide world out there and we're so interconnected, and that Europe was working on these very free, easy trade lines for quite some time before we joined. So we got a bit of a shock happened here. There's a cultural shock going through everybody. The Europeans are getting used to the fact that, hey, those guys left us. They wanted to leave. And the they is a fine majority of people in this population. So now we have to deal with that security issue, which will affect not just goods, but the movement of people. And what are we going to face at the border? All I can tell you at this moment is it will be different. We are getting daily briefings from our cabinet ministers here on my British TV in the morning and again in the evening. Basically, while the government machine starts to say, go look on our website, have a look at the guidance, they've got their top civil servants speaking to us as the population, the general population, saying, be ready, things will change. Do not attempt to turn up for travel without some consequences. So this is about as much of the information as we've got, Doug, is senior cabinet ministers, top 10 people, in fact, top 5 people in our government on TV, live, addressing the nation, saying, if you should turn up at the port of Dover or Heathrow or wherever with your passport not in proper condition, i.e. with at least 6 months to run on it, and with the proper permissions to travel, you probably won't travel. Now, that sounds like a silly thing to say because at the moment, hardly anybody can travel anywhere anyway. UK is in the absolute teeth of this second lockdown, even though they're calling it this tiering period. And tier 4 is the highest period. I live in that T4 period, as does half of the country. So really, it's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time that people can't travel. This is probably a good thing. Otherwise, I think would be the next piece of news you'll be seeing on international news, whether it's BBC or CNN or whoever, is you'd be seeing queues and queues of people at Heathrow and all our various other airports trying to go somewhere, but not being allowed to travel because their travel documentation's wrong. So I actually think in this case, the Brexit is a blessing. Sorry, the COVID is a blessing in handing a real up close and personal people security issue. So forgive me, I did not see your Cozy Bear situation last week, Doug. That's an interesting one on me. But certainly by the time we talk again next time, I will be in the teeth of these security questions on moving goods. I'm quite sure we've been so close to the European Union for so long, and those negotiations were designed to make sure it's fair on both sides. And that's what took so long, to make sure that both sides were happy to go back to their populations and say, we've all done a good deal. So it wasn't one side winning. And part of that deal will be the continuation of the security measures that are in place around the whole EU and the movement of goods. Bearing in mind, I've been in this business a long time, a lot of what happens is very much behind the scene. A lot of the work that's done is done, computer algorithms, looking at things that do not stack up in usual business. So when a particular trader decides to do something that's not correct, and it's movement of goods not in a proper channel, then you will find that will be looked at very closely. I'm sure it's the same over there in the States and a lot of other countries. This is something I get to see quite often in my own work, is that, if someone goes about everything in a normal way, and if you are a good and regular trader with an unblemished track record, your goods will flow freely. When you do something different or try to do something nefarious or not correct, the various authorities on both sides of that transaction are looking at it very closely. So I'd like to think that the trade agreement, though, sorry for a very bland question, answer to your question about how will security work, it's going to be, I believe, pretty much working on the same principles that we've been working on for decades. Just with a slightly different twist in it. I think all these 12 or 1,500 or 2,000 pages we're going to be reading through and analysing will be more about certain industries that had to be protected, such as our fishing industry. And you probably saw again, the fishing industry took all the headlines for the last 2 weeks, but it's less than 1% of our trade with the EU. But it's a political issue and it took the headlines. What I do believe is that our trade in international goods now across Europe will still be very, very secure. It's just that they had to agree how they share data across the various countries.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Pete would pat you on the back for saying if you're a compliant company that follows the rules, you're the right business to align with to help navigate these challenging times with implementation of the agreement. So Pete, that one's for you, my friend. I'm more of a ask for forgiveness, not permission. And Pete said that's not the way to go about managing international trade. So
no. Get it all right first and then go ahead.
Yes, exactly. So you're our international correspondent, but I'm going to ask you to take that hat off and put on your diplomat hat. And now you're coming to America and learning what you've learned or seen in the last couple of weeks with the agreement that was struck between the EU and the UK. What advice would you give to Americans, or what advice would you have for the process as we dive deeper with our agreement through Brexit?
I think we've touched on this maybe before, or at least I've hinted at it. Again, talking diplomatically as an individual person, I would love to see the UK have a fantastic trade deal with our cousins, the USA. It would be amazingly good for business. It would be the boost this country needs. This whole COVID pandemic, we're going to be clocking up a year very soon that we've all been living under this cloud. And it's brutal. And it has cost this country and other countries staggering amounts of money. The damage to the economy is almost unfathomable. I spent some time this afternoon catching up with my brother-in-law, former finance man in the City of London, very, very good at it. And he is just, his point of view is the level of debt that we've had to run up as a country to pay for this unprecedented situation. To me, I believe the only way out of this is trade our way out of this situation, trade with, the biggest economy in the world. And I do feel that we have, as this small island nation We have an awful lot of innovation. We have a lot of things that other people want, and we would love for the American population to want more of it. Conversely, there's an awful lot of things, America invented consumerism, and we want a lot of what you've got. The only way I can foresee that happening is that we get now, I can say this now, an EU-style trade deal with America going forward. Let's lower those tariffs down to zero and let trade be the winner in all cases, because the population, commerce will win through. If we've got great goods, great products, and we can get them to you quickly and efficiently, that's great, and vice versa. And if you take the tariffs out of the way so that you're just in this one free trading market, then that, to me, that's nirvana, really, because we've got this trade deal with our close cousins across the water there, just 22 miles away in Europe, and we've got you guys, our close trading partners for centuries, just across the pond, as we say, right? That, to me, would be the highlight of the next year, if it can be done that quickly. It all depends. We have a new administration coming into office. I'm sure they're extremely busy on a number of fronts, and I don't know if this little 60 million population market is going to be at the top of that list, considering there's so many things to do. But I would love to think it was, and my advice would be, let's quickly strike a free trade deal between the UK and the USA, and let's really show the world how we can do business together. That's my personal belief, and I think it's that of many other people around me as well. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good commentary. Let commerce kind of control it. And you know what? There's a lot of other shit going on in the world right now that this is probably one barrier that we don't need to self-impose. And one great thing about global trade this week is Pete and I can just, give our opinions on a lot of things. And I think the new administration is going to be on an apology tour across the world. And I think that there's going to be a lot of incentive to do exactly what you said. Let's take down the barriers. Let's do it quickly. And let's let some of the trade and the commerce really help us economically on both sides. So I think that's spot on.
It's a two-way win. Yep, it's a two-way win, Doug. You got buyers and sellers. We got buyers and sellers. Let's let them buy and sell together with that huge market of yours over here. And we're as I say, we're still the fifth biggest economy in the world, and I do think people want to trade with us, and I think it's a market worth looking at. I would just urge your new administration to come and have a closer look if they're not doing so already. And if Boris and his team want me out there with you guys, forging a trade deal, I'd volunteer in a heartbeat.
Nice. That's great. Ian, I can't thank you enough for being our man, our boots on the ground out there. And I know as things progress, you're officially dubbed the international correspondent. So we're going to have you on the show again as things really start to materialize out here. And I can't thank you enough. And for our audience at Global Trade this week, I just wanted to remind you that Ian is a lifer in this industry. It's kind of like the mafia, right? When you're in, you never get out. And you've been in the logistics and supply chain for 40 years. And recently, you started your own consulting group, the Independent Supply Chain Professionals. And we'll definitely have some links so folks know how to get in touch with you. And again, Ian, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and we'll catch you in the new year for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Doug, and thank you to your wonderful audience for putting up with me. And I really enjoy this. It makes me think, from a different perspective. And always my pleasure. Just look me up, and I wish you and your audience a very happy new year. See you in 2021. Let's see what happens.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, thanks everybody for joining Global Trade this week. Very forward-thinking conversation with Ian. I appreciate you setting the stage, and we look forward to seeing all of you again very soon. Ian, my man, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Bye for now.
All right. Take care.